Alright. Hello everybody, greetings! It's time for Discussing Tabletop. My sound should be working, because I tested it this time. I know it's one of those rarities when I remember to do these things.
It's fine, I catch it early, because I listen to us.
Joining me today, of course, is Worm. We have a couple of topics today. We have been, I thought about...
My picture is frozen, though. Is that on my end?
Let me try...
No.
It might be on mine. Let me do something for a second. I'll be right back. I'm going to disconnect and reconnect. That might fix. I think what had happened was... You should be working now, right?
Yeah, I mean, I can't see it because you need to switch back. No, it's still frozen.
Let me see where...
Is it? I think it's an OBS thing. I think you might need to, like, refresh the source or something.
Yeah, I refreshed the sources, just to make sure. I think what had happened was, while I was in the pre-show, I did remember I accidentally minimized Discord where I'm capturing the video for OBS, and that probably screwed up. Because of course it does.
To be fair, I've been having, like, I've noticed my camera's been jumpy on Discord or on your stream for a while, so I've been wondering if, like, you need to do something like that.
Just do some refreshes? That might be a good idea.
Yeah. Because,
Yeah, we were just, I felt like we should go live, because we were having a very interesting conversation on the Elder Scrolls series, and, like, you know, with Oblivion coming out in this remaster, I think, you know, we'll see more of these remasters, and it's one of those strange things, is, like, I think it's not that... With how bad Starfield was, could Bethesda recapture magic with their new Elder Scrolls?
Here's the thing. Yeah, Elder Scrolls 6 is supposedly in the works. I don't think they're going to make a Fallout 5 anytime soon, because their Fallout's team is mostly focused on Fallout 76, as far as I'm aware.
I think the big rumor that I've heard, which leads credence because it's the same people that had rumors on the Oblivion remaster, says there's a Fallout 3 remaster in the works.
Honestly, that wouldn't surprise me. But here's the thing. Bethesda, there we go, didn't do the Elder Scrolls remaster. They just handed it off to someone else to do. So.
Oh no, if they just hand off, like, here's a back catalog of a bunch of games. Like, here's Fallout 3, here's New Vegas, here's Morrowind. Go to town with the same people. I think we would be in good luck. Yeah.
Yes. Honestly, yeah, I would love to see all the older ones remastered, because as far as I'm aware, like, they would need to be remastered in the way that, like, you know, they'd need, like, a full overhaul remaster to actually make them, you know, playable.
Yeah, like, I think Oblivion, like, when you look at
even Morrowind,
they call it a remaster, but the more you look under the hood, it is technically a remake, because they did overhaul a bunch of the, like, mechanics and stuff in there. It's a very light remake.
No, so here's the thing. Yeah, I would call it a remaster because the remake, the idea of a... Yeah, you're right. I think Morrowind and the older ones would need a remake. Oblivion, I would actually call it a remaster. Even the voice acting is the same, as in, like, they just reuse the voice lines. There's very little that's, like, new other than the art.
I thought from what they were talking about, they redid a bunch of things, like new sound effects, different voice lines, and the fact that they recorded new people doing them, so there's variety.
They did add more voice lines. I did notice that. But it's, like, not a lot. It's like I've literally noticed one new voice character so far.
Okay.
Yeah. They seem to have done it more for unique quest characters rather than
yeah, so
like just doing a lot of the generic voice lines.
I think it straddles an interesting line, because they do have little quality of life things in there too. So I don't think it's not a full remake, but it's a little bit more than a remaster. So it's somewhere in between there that it's still good to have because it's updated for the modern age, regardless.
To be fair, I would consider the amount of work they did on it to be a remaster, because here's the thing, remasters are. They still do bug fixes and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Wait. With that said,
you mean I could play up how I did previously and get to the Shivering Isles, and my game doesn't brick.
Yeah, it shouldn't brick. Actually, although, fun fact, they left in one bug, which I find hilarious.
Okay.
It wasn't even a bug, it was a mistake, actually. I would call it a mistake rather than a bug. Because it was, I don't know if you've heard the voice line where it's like, wait, let me do that again. And then they redo the line. There's one voice line in there that's like, have you heard of the blah blah? Wait, hold on. Let me do that one again. Did you hear of the blah blah blah? You know, it's like, and they left that in the game. And I find that hilarious that they just left that in.
I think it was very good that a lot of what they did is they kept the charm of the Oblivion, because again, like, this is the charm of it as like an older game. And looking back, because we are a tabletop podcast, I think this conversation can go for, like, you know, anything that you're like redoing new editions of and stuff like that. You want to keep the charm of what your game is, and I think they did a good job of keeping the charm of what people loved about Oblivion, while fixing some of those, like, minor complaints about stuff, like, you know, fixing a little bit of the UI and stuff like that, you know, make it a little bit more akin to the more modern.
Actually, one of the more interesting things, okay, so I don't, you know, the athletic skill, the athletic skill just makes you move faster.
Mm-hmm.
And you know how jank it looked, how you, like, just kept the same animation and you just move faster? Before?
Yeah.
They actually made it look good. Like, it actually, like, so as you get faster, you, like, do this, like, sprinting motion where you're, like, almost Naruto running without the hands forward. It's like you're, like, leaning forward and just sprinting.
I mean, at least they, like, gave it something. It is nice and silly.
So you're just, like, it's like you're just sprinting everywhere. Like, it looks good. It doesn't look it doesn't look just, I mean, there was a charm to the, like, slight jog while moving at, like, 100 clips, you know?
I think it's also relevant for us to be talking about Oblivion, because how many, like, campaigns are inspired by Oblivion, Elder Scrolls, and stuff like that, you know? It definitely...
Yeah.
It's a deep fantasy that definitely has had a lot of inspiration, so I'm assuming we'll see a bunch more.
Yeah, I mean, let's be real. We touch on this every now and then. Actually, that makes me realize there's no Elder Scrolls TTRPG, is there? They have a Fallout RPG, but not an Elder Scrolls, as far as I'm aware.
Elder Scrolls TTRPG. Is there one? There's an unofficial one, but no official one as far as I can tell. Yeah, I didn't even think about it, because we have a couple of board games from Modiphius, because they have, like, the Elder Scrolls, Skyrim, the adventure game, which I guess is, like, a couple... Their adventure games do tend to have a lot of, like, role-play elements, because I think I feel like always they're akin to something like, you know, us playing the Wrath of the Sharnlon game, because that's a board game, but has very heavy role-playing elements in a board game format, you know? But it's still not... There's no full RPG. Yeah.
Yeah, and the main reason I find that... honestly, I don't think I'd find that as interesting if we didn't have a Fallout RPG.
True. Yeah.
Which shows that they've, like... Because I actually really do find the lore of Elder Scrolls interesting.
I like... Because I heard someone talking about it, how it's technically, like... Because what is Oblivion takes place in the, was it third or fourth age? I just had seen, like, the intro where Patrick Stewart pops it out with, like, it takes place at the end of one of the ages.
Technically, I think it's the end of the fourth age and the beginning.
Skyrim takes place in yeah, but apparently, well, I think it's like there are 2 extra ages. It's like that have names, and then they go into the numbered ages. So sort of like that's confusing. So it's like you had two ages, and then you had the first age. It's not the first age, but it's called the first age. But I'm guessing it's like, you know, things happen that caused, like, you know, maybe like the Empire and stuff like that to rise and, you know, stuff like that. It's just interesting little history things about that and stuff like that. No, it's a very interesting world. I always talk about how, like, interesting worlds are always fun to explore. Granted, you can always make your own, but it's that entire thing of, like, it's why we play RPGs that are based upon media. They have interesting worlds, and a lot of people would like to use those as stepping off points for their own stories, you know?
Yeah.
You can do half the work. It's why, like, you know, people like Forgotten Realms or Valerian or any of these other places, because, hey, it's half the work's done. There's already a world. I can make my own stuff in this world, but I've done half the work, and, you know, and that's another interesting world. That'd be great to explore, but we don't have stuff there. Yeah.
Yeah, so the fourth era... the third era ends with the closing of the with the ending of the Oblivion Crisis.
And so Skyrim takes place in the fourth era. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I just know that Skyrim was like a couple hundred, like a 100 or 200 years after Oblivion or something like that. I briefly heard this recently with the announcement and talking of the remaster.
Elder Scrolls Online takes place in the second era. The rest of the and then Elder Scrolls 1, 2, 3, and 4 take place in the third era. 4 technically takes place. Technically, if you end the Oblivion Crisis, it's the fourth era. So you can technically argue that it's both.
Yeah, it's on the border of that because it's sort of like the storyline is moving between the eras.
And then the fourth era, and then Skyrim is the fourth era.
Yeah. I mean, you know, I don't. It's this weird thing of like Oblivion Remaster seems great, and you know, it's not that Bethesda hasn't done great things before, but like with a lot of their current track record, I'm not holding out hopes for Elder Scrolls 6, but I would love for it to be really great. You know, I don't know.
Yeah, actually, fun fact. Technically, the King of the Nine DLC takes place in the fourth era. So Oblivion does straddle them. Because the King of the Nine is the DLC for Oblivion. It's the one where, like, the gods get involved with stuff.
I think I didn't get to that one because I was doing because there's the two DLCs. It's like the Shivering Isles one, where you go with all the madness stuff, and then it was the gods. And I started the Shivering Isles one. And that's when,
there's also the horse armor.
I did not get the horse armor. Oh man, you know.
Actually, fun fact. It does include all the Oblivion remaster. I'm pretty sure includes all the DLC.
Yeah, I saw that. That was really good for them too. You know, that they didn't like. Mm-hmm. They made it like the how they did all those Game of the Year editions and stuff like that, where they included all. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
but I think that's how I got both New Vegas and Fallout 3 when I played them. Skyrim, I think I had to purchase the DLC because I got it on its own. I don't know. So, hey, you know, exciting stuff there. Maybe this will get someone working on a Elder Scrolls RPG. Maybe. TTRPG. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Anyway, we should talk about some topics. We only have a few this week, and some of them might kind of like skim over a little bit more than others. But, you know, we got some things. I guess we'll start with Magic the Gathering just a little bit, because, you know, there is 3 things I wanted to hit on here. First off, we did get another secret layer. I'm just going to mention it. It's The Adventures of the Little Witch, if you want to check it out. I would link it. I don't really want to go into depths about it, because it looks adorable. And I have no idea if the cards are valuable or not, but that's up to you if you want to look it up. But it's available. It's not a big one, though, too. Anyway, I think the big things are we got a bunch of unbans in Commander, which is interesting, which has... Here's the thing. Unbans are something that, like, I hadn't heard about a lot until more recently. Like, and I kind of have been half paying attention to the bans and unbans for over the last couple of years. I think I haven't really heard about any in any other formats. It's kind of one of those things is, I think because we have this new panel, they're re-looking at all the older bans. And some of these cards have been banned since the early days of Commander. So, yeah. And I think they say, correct in this big article here, the format's changed. I think this probably could be safe for any card game. The format changes, and something that could be a game breaker at one point in time, you know, now has 27 different, or let's say not that many, but let's say it was something that maybe had one answer to it, now has 5 answers to it. So it's no longer this be all end all. And so they actually unbanned 5 cards, which is a good amount. And they also, in the full article, which I'm not going to go over all of it there, but they did talk about how there's a bunch of other cards, some of which are we're going to keep this banned for obvious reasons, and other ones are this not the time for it, but we might consider it in the future. Sort of put it on the back burner. So it was an interesting article that, if you're interested in the state of organized play for Commander. Because again, if you're just at home with people, it really doesn't matter what's banned and unbanned, and it's banned or not.
Yeah, and you just make your own rules.
Yeah. Normally, Kitchen Table Magic, even Kitchen Table Commander, doesn't really care about that. It's just if I would go to a store. Because I gotta be honest, it's another reason I play Legacy Vintage, because some of these cards that they talk about here, I have in decks, and I'm ooh. They banned.
Yeah, because let's be real. If it's all if there's this ultimate winning card that someone plays, and you're just okay, dude, I'm not gonna play you if you want to play that deck. That's Kitchen Table.
Yeah, it's honestly speaking, some of these cards it just fits with the themes of the deck, so that's why I put them in there. But I also know this deck's a jerk. Look, I'm not gonna lie. I play all colors of Magic. That includes blue, and everybody kind of hates blue because it's the jerk deck, jerk color. Though people play blue because it's fun to be the jerk sometimes. So, it's interesting. Yeah, they give good explanations for all these, but yeah. So, no bans in Commander, but a bunch of unbans. Okay. So the big thing I want to talk about here, and this is one that I think I want to talk about a little bit, but Claire in college, the professor, did a much better, full expose on this. And it's something that we're facing now with it's both a problem and not a problem a lot of things. And it comes down to Universes Beyond. Because for Spider-Man, they can't have an online version of it for Arena or Magic. Or Magic Online. They're two premier online ways of play. They don't have the digital rights to Spider-Man. So they can put it in paper Magic, but they can't put those cards online. And at very least, Spider-Man is a legal standard deck. So what they're doing is versions that are entered through the Omen Paths, which are digital versions which have different names and art, but are expected the same card. And it is a answer, but I think it was explained best is, if you're someone that wants, this can be difficult because it's learning double the amount of cards, especially if you play both digital and physical, or if you go from one to the other, you might not know the same cards. Also, it used to be very easy that if you had a deck list for something or let's say Arena, you could take that deck list, and there were stores you could send that deck list to, and you could buy a physical version of the deck you built.
Yeah.
Or other ways, you get decks that people play with, and you're oh, I want to build this in Arena, and send it over there. But now that doesn't work because these are two different cards, different names. You have to go manually into it. So there's a lot of inconvenience, a lot more confusion. It's kind of feels like it is a mess because it is separating the two a lot more. Which isn't necessarily good. Is this the end of the world kind of thing? No. But this is another death blow to the health of a game kind of thing. When you have a premier digital format and a physical format, and they are different. Even if it's slightly different, they're still different. I kind of worried about this when they came out with the digital-only format Alchemy, where they had a lot of weird, really crazy cards that only work in a digital format. I thought that was kind of crazy. So, I don't know. And again, apparently, they should have known about this, which is the big thing, because they had trouble putting the Warhammer stuff on digitally. It was a mess getting it up online. I didn't know about this.
Yeah.
The Warhammer Commander sets.
I mean, so here's the thing with all of this. I feel like there's going to be ways to mitigate this to some extent, but like especially if there's a lot of online resources for Magic cards, and especially if they basically say this card / this card, that might work and kind of help people get that mix, get that combo set up. But honestly, maybe if they just go through and create real cards that have these same stats, because most of the cards are just reskins.
Yes.
So there are some that aren't. And they should just go and create real cards.
But here's the thing. Here's the thing. And here's the thing that I think says it best. The Through the Omen Paths are reskins of the Universes Beyond cards. It's the opposite than it really should be now. Because, yeah, and I think that's the thing that it rubs me the wrong way. And the thing is, there will be more Marvel sets. They're already planning 2 more Marvel-based sets, meaning this is not the only one that will have this problem, that we won't have digital cards for. Because Disney won't give up the digital license.
I mean, Wizards, what are you doing? There's already a Marvel TTRPG, or a Marvel trading card game. TCG, that's what I wanted.
Yeah. It's this thing that they've been working on the Spider-Man, and they should have known there would be a problem with this, but they still went ahead with the drawing. And now they're telling us that there's a, like, you know...
Well, it's also going to happen with the Final Fantasy and the Avatar The Last Airbender one.
Final Fantasy and Avatar, they've got the digital rights for them. So they can put them online. It's just that, like, when you negotiate, you're not just doing the paper, apparently. You're doing paper and digital rights to put different cards up, because those are 2 different sources. And the thing is, they were able to negotiate very easily for the Final Fantasy and Avatar. But for Marvel and Disney, it was not able to negotiate it. And the thing is, shouldn't you have known that ahead of time? You know?
I mean, yes, but see, here's the thing: Marvel's very popular and makes lots of money. But Disney knows that too, meaning they would have made them have to pay a lot for it, and they didn't want to do that, and they wanted the quick money over the thing that makes fans happy.
Yeah, because I think it really comes down to Disney doesn't really have like a physical TTRPG per se, CCG for Marvel stuff.
I'm pretty sure they do.
CCG? I think they have, like, card games, but no, like, trading card games or collecting card games. They might. Because it's not like... So they've got Lorcana, but that's, like, more like actual Disney animation properties. Because I know Final Fantasy has a trading card game on its own, but it's not been that popular here in the West. It's been more like a...
Okay, yeah, hold on, what is this?
I'm sure they have some card games.
I think I know what's going on. Weren't they going to create one soon?
They might have talked about it. But they don't have it out yet. So maybe because... That might make sense that maybe they made the deal for 3 sets now while they're developing something on their own, because they can get the money now from Wizards, who's like kind of like, you know, earning money for them ahead of time. But because, like, again, digital rights is an entirely different thing, and they have some, like, digital trading card games and stuff like that are normal. Because they do. They do have some digital trading card games already. So that's why maybe, that's another reason maybe they didn't want to do the digital rights as easy. Or make them as value, you know, thing like that. So. But again, it comes down to this problem of, because they made Universes Beyond standard legal, this became more of an issue. If it had just been like with the Warhammer one, and been commander sets, or special sets, or stuff like that, or just like, you know, expanded stuff, that formats it was in, it would have been so much better. But, again, also, like, it's... If I'm playing, and I'm playing the Through the Omen Pass version, and I really like those cards, maybe I don't want Spider-Man versions of them. Or if I'm a Spider-Man fan and want to play online with those cards, I can't. So it's like these 2 things that people get to love these cards and the versions of them, they can't play it in the other format. And I think that just it hurts people too. You know, as much as I'm not a fan of Arena, I know a lot of people are. Honestly, I didn't really like Arena. I really like Paper Magic though. But again, like also, I don't really like Spider-Man cards. I like Spider-Man. I just don't want Spider-Man cards. You know, I would prefer the through the open pass version of them, honestly, even if they're silly, you know, and like kind of somehow make sense. But I don't know.
I have no idea. Okay, so I found this thing, this Marvel Mission. What's it called? Marvel Mission Arena trading card game is a thing.
I think that's their digital one.
No, that's physical. They've got physical stuff. I'm looking at physical stuff.
Okay, that's the physical. Is it a?
But it seems I don't think it's in the U.S. is the issue.
It makes sense too. Again, it's sort of like, as I was saying with the Final Fantasy trading card game, it's much bigger in Japan than it is in the U.S. here, and I think that's another reason why the Square was willing to have Magic do a version of it.
Yeah, whereas this one seems to be in Europe.
Yeah, because like Magic does have popularity in Japan, just it's not as big there as like other trading card games. So it's sort of like they're fine with it existing there because they're already getting their own trading card game. I don't think Avatar has anything, so I don't know. It's more of a mess that Wizards keeps like. They've been digging this hole when it comes to a lot of stuff they're doing, and I don't know how deep this hole is going to go, or when this hole will start flooding. But if they're digging it, maybe they're lucky and they'll figure out when to stop, you know, for just the right spot. Or they'll keep the floodwaters from coming in. I don't know. But it's more of a mess. Unfortunate.
Yeah, so there is a thing. I have heard of something, but yeah. Maybe they're planning to bring it to the US at some point. Maybe that's what I heard. Because technically, I think this was released in like based on what I saw, it seemed to be about 2023 is when this was made.
Yeah.
So maybe they're working on it. I feel like, I swear we talked about it at some point on this show.
We might have talked about something related to it because we've talked about a few different things. But
yeah.
More
that one was like creating or coming to America or something. I don't think.
Yeah. Well, again, like there's a lot of different things in development, so it's just you have to see which ones end up coming. And it does sound like we're definitely like at this weird spot in time where there is a very good, like a really good boon in variety in trading cards / collectible card games. I think right now that have enough popularity to exist. I don't think it's quite like the boon that came out after Magic started, but certainly speaking, like, we have a lot more variety than just, like, Magic, Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh! You know?
Yeah, it's so interesting to me how trading card games work, because they basically require, like, okay, back in the day they didn't, but nowadays, in order to start one, you basically need a popular IP. You need something to get people interested in the first place.
I think that's a lot of them. There are a few that have managed to come about on their own. I think because, like, I'm not big on it, but I know Flesh and Blood actually has done a pretty good job of getting into the market on their own. Are they a big player? Probably in the top 10. But that doesn't say a lot, you know. But maybe if they're down around, like, 9 or 10. Mm-hmm. Still, that's not a bad spot to be in for coming out of nowhere. But then again, you've got things like the One Piece trading card game, Wakana from Disney. There's a couple more that I'm not remembering off the top of my head that have been pretty big as of recent. And of course, then, you know, yes, Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh!, you know, Magic, which have been always the big three, kind of, out there. So, and yeah, you are right, though. It's right now easiest to use a popular IP to really jump into it. More than just having a really cool idea. It's not that you can't, it's just uphill battle all the way. And even then, you need a game that works, even if you have popular IP to succeed now. So it's sort of like, it's not easy to break into the trading card / collectible card market at all.
Yeah, okay. And honestly, Flesh and Blood, okay, I'm reading real fast up on it.
Yeah.
It's interesting how it got started. It was actually meticulously made. Okay. So here's what happened. Someone who actually was a professional Magic the Gathering player, in from New Zealand, decided to make his own card game and tried to make it like really complex, and spent 7 years developing it, and started doing only limited runs like in New Zealand, and then it gained popularity, and it like expanded from there. So like it was done in a very smart way. But so yeah, I can see, but you basically still have to, it's hard to break into that market without doing it right.
Yeah. I was just looking up a couple more games that were on there that I forgot about. Star Wars Unlimited, forgot about that one. Apparently, Union Arc Arena. I think we mentioned it a few times because that was a very interesting one, because it's Union Arena is basically the anime IP, the card game, because it's all anime, and they just do a bunch of different IPs, though, for it. So I feel like that's an interesting one, because Union Arena is doing Universes Beyond, but it's doing it on purpose, you know? So that's very interesting that way. And there's also the Dragon Ball TCG I didn't know about, off the top of my head, and Digimon still is apparently a good TCG. That's very interesting. From looking from the top sellers from 2024. Flesh and Blood is very interesting because it's number 10. As I said, it's in the top 10, and it came out of nowhere, you know? So, yeah, but when you look at the rest of them, all the rest of them have IPs behind them to make them exist, you know? So
yeah, and that's the thing. Like, this one was done very much from the ground up in a very meticulous way. Flesh and Blood, I mean. Most of the other ones, if they want to go straight to like a global market or even something as big as the US market, you basically need to have an IP behind you.
Yeah, it's interesting, but definitely a mess, right? So it doesn't mean you couldn't crash onto the scene. Just like, I'm not gonna lie. Again, I think it's right now the best way to get a game like this out there is have a really good game, and then also a really popular IP, or popular enough IP.
And you can bypass the good game with the popular IP.
I mean, no, the thing is, none of the ones that have a popular IP that actually don't have a good game stick around. They can get popular for a bit. That's true. But then they die. So I think the only way to succeed for a longer period is not, like, you can get started with the IP, but if your game is good enough, you can stick around.
I agree. No, I actually 100% agree with that. I'm just saying, if you want to start one, you basically need a popular IP, not necessarily a good game. If you want to stick around, you need a good game, not necessarily a popular IP.
Yeah. Makes perfect sense. So, anyway, that's kind of a little expose on the state of the trading card world. That, unfortunately, Magic's still pretty big up there, but it was interesting to see that, well, Pokemon was the top seller last year for not good reasons. I'm not gonna lie, that's an entire other can of worms we haven't really talked about, and it's the goddamn secondary market of Pokemon and the issues that are going on with that mess. Ugh. That's an entire thing. That might be something to discuss one of these days, is the mess that's the Pokemon TCG. Just to, like, look at that kind of from the outside. Oof. Anyway.
I do find it funny because a quick lookup for what's the best secondary market for Pokemon, and they said eBay.
Yeah.
It's funny because then like there are promoted ones which actually have like multiple secondary market like dedicated websites. But someone on Reddit is just like, yeah, eBay's the best place to go.
Again, because it's like, as much as it's hateful and terrible, scalpers are the king of Pokemon trading card game right now, in a lot of ways. So it is a
now,
quite
I can see why
mess.
eBay would be better because that's where you don't have to like compete against. Yeah. Anyway.
That way, honestly speaking, you can I think they suggest that also because in that case you focus on individual cards, which you cannot get a markup on. Yes, the card can be expensive because it's expensive because of the market, which can include the secondary market, but the market will regulate the price a lot more than products that you can't buy at all. So
Yeah.
Markups exist on physical process a lot more. Anyway, we should move on. Anyway,
Yeah.
let's talk about elves. So the official campaign books or books for elves from the Lord of the One Ring and the Lord of the Rings 5e have released. So I think we talked about them when these books when they were announced originally / on some. They probably went to it's Kickstarter, but I was trying to think of the other word, crowdfunding. There we go, crowdfunding. That's the word I was looking for. My brain just didn't work about that. So it's the Keepers of the Elven Rings and Realms of the Three Rings. So yes, these are your source books for elves, the Elven regions, probably playing elves and stuff in Lord of the Rings. So now you can totally be your Legolas if you really want to, and your Lord of the Rings. I'm probably sure you probably could have put the base book, but it kind of expands upon that probably. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think it gives more lore and also just some other stuff. Might also give like some of the sub elves. Like I know there are several different types of elves in Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that like if you've just seen the movies, you're only picking up like a little bit of the elven culture. Certainly you can kind of see it, but like the books can go into a lot more detail about this. And certainly speaking, there is extended material that Tolkien did, but like having like
there's a whole. I know there's like a whole difference between the the Elrond elves and the forest elves in Lord of the Ring or in The Hobbit. Not that the book makes that out, or not that the movie Hobbit makes that any clearer. They kind of blend them and then bring Legolas in for no reason.
Again, it's supposed to be. I think there are like because it's the three rings went to the elves. I think it's supposed to be the three different elven groups are slightly different. You know? But yeah, it doesn't really get into that very well in a lot of like the movies and all like that. They're just elves there. But and again, like maybe physically they're not much different, but culturally they definitely are, and that's like an important part of it that you don't get into. I mean, I guess in the Hobbit movies we do see a better look at the kingdom where Legolas comes from, which is good. But again, I have opinions about those movies anyway. But there are those were movies. Way too many of them. But, I think it's a really interesting book. It's kind of one of those things. Is like definitely having played through Return to Moria with you and Joe got me more like happy about like a lot of the Lord of the Rings lore than I had been, because that was a lot of really interesting dwarven lore. So it's sort of like I would now be more interested in this book now because of that, because that delved into a lot of like the interesting expanded dwarven lore, and this is the interesting expanded elven lore. If the stuff's presented in a really good way, it makes it a lot cooler than just like I just don't feel like reading all of those books Tolkien did. Sorry, Tolkien. No offense.
If you really like, so basically, if you watch the movies and you read if you watch the three good movies and then read The Hobbit, you basically have everything Tolkien expected you to know.
Yeah.
The Silmarillion was apparently, I think, not supposed to be published. It was published by his son, and it was a bunch of works. It was like a work that he didn't. It was more like notes and stuff that was turned into a book. I don't remember all that.
I think it was something that like
there was something like that.
I think it's kind of like I would describe that as your GM and you're building a world. You make a bunch of notes down, and then when you do the adventure, you don't always use all those notes. Like, I invented all this stuff about these places. I know about these places in case they come up or I need to do something with them. I don't need it. So I think that's a lot more of what it was. It was like him like coming up with his world a lot more. And yeah, it wasn't complete. Is this stuff that he intended to publish? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe he would have wanted to eventually publish it and help it do his work. We don't know. But his son was like, hey, people love this stuff. Let's throw it out there.
Yeah.
It's more feature.
Okay, yeah. So apparently, like, I think he got a assistance from another fantasy fiction writer of the time. The son got another fantasy fiction writer to help turn it into like a storybook. But yeah, it was basically just a bunch of notes. Like, and there was a bunch of good like stories. People like the Similarian.
Yeah,
but yeah,
I think it's because it's sort of like he had a lot of really interesting ideas to help flesh out the world he had. And
oh yeah, no, and that's the thing. Like, that is very common.
It could have been writing that kind of stuff somewhere down the line. If he had lived longer, he might have been inspired to write more books set in his world in Middle Earth.
Mm-hmm.
That's why maybe he had stuff like this, because he was thinking about that. Or this could have been done during Lord of the Rings. We don't know. I know. But the Elven books are available now in both the One Ring and the 5e version of the Lord of the Rings. Interested in them? Check them out. Alright, so we can never get away from it because it has some effects constantly and we're learning more about it. Tariff stuff. So, Come On Games, which is a fairly large company within the tabletop industry. Probably I would say this is like the double A of tabletop. Sorry, I'll link the article. There's probably some more. This would be definitely described as like more like a double A company at very least. It's not your Wizards of the Coast, but it's sort of like pretty high up there. They've paused all their game developing and crowdfunding projects because of this. That's a pretty big market shift, plus like losing people to it. And also there is, which was an interesting article, there is a bit of a thing that apparently this article was good about the RPG books and tariffs, and also there is a lawsuit. But the big thing here the lawsuit's interesting because a tabletop company is basically suing over this entire thing because it's, basically ruining their business,
yeah, no, 100%. Like, this is...
For every $10 they spend, they have to spend $14.50 on a tariff, which is ridiculous. For they have to spend.
I think it's something higher.
They're saying 145% in the article here.
Okay, maybe it's settled at that.
For getting the stuff from China. But it is interesting that I did not know about this, that RPG books were originally held as games.
It seems to have settled at 145, I thought it was.
Yeah. In back in 89, 91. And it was last year that RPG books were changed from games to books. And that's why, at least the RPG books are good for not being affected by tariffs, because books aren't affected by tariffs. So right now, they're safe because of a ruling from last year. So that's really interesting that, things could have been worse for the tabletop industry, at least the RPG side of this.
Again, like I've said this before, it's like, if you want to move, if the U.S. government wants to move, like the creation of things from China to the U.S., I don't think these high tariffs are, like something like ridiculous tariffs like this are a bad thing. As long as you give plenty of lead-up time so people can make changes. Like, honestly, like 2 years lead-up time, or more. I mean, 2 years is a short period of time in a business area, so, to, like, get ready for something like that. But
I think the other thing about this is it unfortunately hits small businesses a lot more, because I was...
Oh, 100%. That's honestly the worst part, too.
Yeah, I did not put an article about it here, but when I was looking through the news this week, Wizards and Hasbro were able to basically say, like, hey, we're going to be pretty, at least Wizards side, they're going to pretty much be unaffected, at least on the D&D side of things. Because they can have big enough orders. They can print books in the U.S. You need large enough orders to print books here in the U.S.
Yes. So, there is something, yes. I mean, okay. So, when it really comes down to it, yes, you do. But because costs in the U.S. are so much higher, because we have things such as safety regulations and, labor laws. Because we have those things, doing things in America tends to be more expensive, which is why it's cheaper to do stuff in China why I actually am not against the idea of like taxing China and you know the tariff wars and stuff. Like the idea behind it, I think is okay. I think it's just the absolute worst execution you could possibly have done.
I think it's also like this entire thing we're talking about with Wizards and then talking about, oh, we make it US side. I'm like, yes, because you can. Because you buy in high enough bulk that because when you buy in bulk, it's usually cheaper, that it makes it cheap enough that it's at least equal or less than shipping it from China. Basically,
so, yeah.
You can yes, it's more expensive to put it here, but when you buy in high enough numbers, that evens out, you know?
Yeah, so basically what this comes down to is basically how much automation. If you have a bajillion customers and you can basically be constantly running a printing, you can basically dedicate a whole printing section of a building to your product, to your few products, then you can do that in America because automation actually saves a lot of money in America and actually in some ways can be cheaper than China. The problem is if you're doing limited printings or you need a print on demand, you need a lot more people involved, meaning meaning where in America, where people are more expensive, it's easier to go overseas.
Smaller print runs and print demand are things that you need to do. I think the only thing that they said that they will be more expensive is that the starter thing that we talked about a few weeks ago that D&D is doing, or the kind of starter thing, box set, that they have to get it from China, which will be more expensive. But we don't know how much more expensive it's going to be. But we know it's going to be more expensive, they said. That's the only product that they said is going to be affected by this. Which, they haven't talked about Magic cards, so I believe they print Magic cards in the areas they normally do, or they print them in America and ship them, as far as I know. Because again...
I couldn't tell you.
I think they do, because again, like, I think they have dedicated printers, because they make a crap ton of Magic cards. I'm sorry, you know? It's like, they can do it here with the automation, and they do the big print sheets, you know?
Yeah. So there really is, like, a thing where, yes, we do need to hire, like, I mean, there is a lot of issues with jobs in America and stuff, in part because so much of our production goes overseas to places like China where it's really cheap because there aren't, and because it's basically funding human rights violations, you know? But, you know, and which is why I'm like, okay, I can understand the idea of wanting to try and move stuff to America, or even just move stuff to Europe or Canada or anywhere that's like fine. You know, which is why I don't think we should tariff everyone like we're doing. We should tariff the people who we want to move business away from.
It's also a thing, like, too, like, right now, especially in this kind of the RPG tabletop thing, the companies that are doing better are like your Wizards and Hasbro, because they do have this infrastructure in place to make things in the US, you know? Yeah. When you don't have that, it's bad. Wizards is going to be fine, but even, as I said, Come On Games, who is a pretty big name in tabletop, if you, like, you know, it is, as I said, like the AA of, like, you know, companies. It's a pretty moderate-sized company. Can't do stuff very easily, and is canceling a lot of stuff because they have uncertainty and are unsure if they can do stuff, or have to have, like, raise massive amounts of prices.
Yeah, and a very important issue here is that, like, I mean, it's just they're also a lot more, they do a lot more miniatures and stuff. Like, D&D is like 90% books, which is why it's like, even if they did print overseas, they'd be fine. But like, Come On Games is 90%, and they obviously use overseas. Like, that's the thing. I don't blame a company for using overseas because it's cheaper, you know? Like, that's the thing. Business is designed to make money. It's not designed to be ethical. The people inside can do stuff, but that's ultimately what happens is you as buyers influence the market. If you as a buyer only buy if people in America only bought things made in America, then people would only make things in America, even if it was more expensive.
Yeah. If you want it to be more ethical, then you have to spend the extra money. You're willing to put that money where your mouth is, basically.
Yeah. Now, there are ways for the government to get involved, like I said, with tariffs and such. However, it needs to be done right and smart so as not to hurt yourself. It's like they're literally shooting themselves in the head in order to make the other person get a splatter of blood on them, you know? It's all like, and to make them uncomfortable. That's basically what we're doing with these tariffs.
Yeah. I hate kind of talking about it, but it's a thing to keep important talking about because we're in the tabletop industry. The tabletop industry is taking a hit from this, you know.
Yep.
Again, especially all the smaller people that are out there, and I think that's also why it's important to talk about that the second article there where it is Stegmeyer is in a Stonemeyer Games is in a lawsuit about this. So, yeah, you know, it's a company with 8 U.S.-based employees that, you know, that's not a lot of people, but they're leading a fight, you know, because it's their livelihood. It's either fighting it out in the courts, in this case, or fold, maybe, you know? So they're doing what they have to do. You know, so, hey. And there apparently is more people in the lawsuit. I haven't looked into the full lawsuit, but they are... The thing that was talking about this year, talked about them joining. So... You have a link to the rest of the lawsuit. I don't know if you do. I only saw the stone.
Oh, I have a link. I have a link to the lawsuit. Do you want me to post it?
Sure, the full lawsuit. Thank you.
Well, it's not like it's basically Stonemeyer's Games announcement about their lawsuit.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. They're joining a lawsuit. I don't know who else is in it, but they're making it. Basically, it's also another thing is, you know, linking together a bunch of probably smaller companies are probably doing this just to handle legal costs under the suit, which is good, you know. Fight for your lives, guys. We support you. You know, this is a case where we're like, yeah, this is like taking things just way too far. Like as I said too, I'm not against. I agree with you. I'm not against the idea of a tariff here and there, but you have to use them smart. You know, they're a tool, and as I said, it's a scalpel, and they're being used as a chainsaw.
Yep.
It's just. Not right. Anyway.
Yeah. You're literally stabbing yourself in the stomach to poke the guy behind you.
There's a time and a place for that, and this wasn't it. You know. So. As
good of a move as that is in Soul Calibur, if you can hit it, it's not a good policy for the United States.
You know, there's a time and a place where that might be helpful to do.
That is an obscure reference, by the way. There's one move with one character that he spins around, stabs himself in the gut, and it has a very short range, but if you hit it, it does a ton of damage. And it hits the guy behind him.
God, I haven't played Soul Calibur forever.
Yeah, hold on. Yeah, I haven't either.
Because I can remember is it Ivy?
The only reason I know about this is because it was my brother's favorite character.
There's the guy with the evil sword. Is it him or is it Bolo?
No, it's the Yoshimitsu, I think.
Oh yeah, Yoshimitsu.
He's actually from Tekken, but yeah.
Well,
the Soul Calibur brings in people from a bunch of places, so.
They do. Well, shall we continue though? Because there's a few more topics to hit up.
Right? This is Soul Calibur? Maybe it's not. Anyway, but it's someone like that.
He has a sword, so I feel like he would be in Soul Calibur, but there could be another game that he's also
missing. Mitsurugi. I'm pretty sure it's Mitsurugi. Hold on.
Okay.
Nope, that's a different guy. Nope, I'll keep looking.
That's fine. Let's talk about Assassin's Creed briefly. I think we talked about how they're doing an Assassin's Creed TTRPG, but we're also getting a board game. It's Animus, they call it. We don't know a lot about it, what kind of game it will be, I know it's probably not an RPG. Well, because it's like Ubisoft, it's...
Oh, yeah, it was Yoshimitsu. Okay, I was right the first time.
Okay, I thought you were right the first time. Like, I'm like, Yoshimitsu, that sounds familiar. But, yeah. What will this Assassin's Creed-based board game be? I have no idea. We don't know a lot about it, but they've announced it. And, when we talked about the RPG, it's one of these interesting things that's sort of like... Oh, there's a pre-campaign page. We're getting a bunch of, like, Assassin's Creed stuff now, and I'm like, sure, we just did get a game fairly recently. I don't feel as though Assassin's Creed is, like, so popular we should be getting a bunch of tabletop stuff unless this was, like... Again, this takes time. But even the last few years, it's been okay popular, but it hasn't been, like... I think it's waned since, like, honestly, Assassin's Creed 3. But since the, like, original trilogy.
Yep.
So...
I mean, I think it was waning even a little bit before that because they took so long to bring out Assassin's Creed 3.
Yeah. But I think people liked it a lot,
They did. And Assassin's Creed Black Flag, which is Assassin's Creed 4, basically, also was very popular, but I have not heard a single person say they loved a game after that one.
Yeah. And I'm like... I think the latest one, and I can't even remember its name, had problems, but not for the reason that a lot of people talked about, but it had its own problems,
Oh yeah, no, it had a lot of problems. Yeah, there was that one problem that people...
There was like, so many people talked about the wrong problems with the game, when it's just a kind of mid-Assassin's Creed game, I think, with some own problems for the, the way the story is presented, because it's an Assassin's Creed game. So it's sort of like, there are different problems that you should talk about rather than, like, the setup or anything like that around it, or things like that, I'm sorry. If you're annoyed about Assassin's Creed displaying, I
mean, I actually
it displays every culture kind of wrong,
to be fair, the original Assassin's Creed, the first two Assassin's Creed actually did a really good job with their research and history.
I think they started out well, but from the sounds of it, it's kind of gone like, it's not bad, but they're just painting like they did very well to begin with. And
the first two games were like extremely well researched. The rest, like after that, it got a little bit more fantastical, or a little bit, and then number 3 I think was fine. Number 4 was fine. I don't know about the rest. The rest I think were just basically like, let's make a game where you jump around and stab people.
Yeah, I think it's sort of like when they started making them a lot, got away from what was good about their original format, and just became like kind of like their own generic thing of themselves. I think that's kind of where things have been at this point in time. That is it good, is it bad? I think these games tend to just be okay, but it's also like, I think some people have been talking about how, like, and again, this harkens back to we talk about the Assassin's Creed RPG, we're talking about this board game that's a competitive board game. Assassin's Creed also, like, is kind of outdated for some of this stuff. So I remember I saw someone talking about how, like, we get some really great mocap from a lot of other games right now, and Assassin's Creed is kind of terrible. The characters and the mocap for them. It's sort of like, and that's showing that, like, the games are aged before they come out. Oh, I remember. Someone was talking about this because they were worried because I think going back to our beginning thing, Elder Scrolls, the next one, 6, they're theoretically using the same engine they've always used, and that's a very old engine at this point in time.
Yeah. To be fair, engines can be overhauled.
Yes.
Are they going to do that? Maybe, but, like, probably not, knowing Bethesda, because as far as... They did overhaul it a bit for
Starfield? Yeah.
Starfield, thank you.
I
wanted to say, my brain said Starfinder, and then I couldn't find the right word.
Starfield, I feel like, is the top of the overhaul they can do on their engine. But again, like, when we're talking about 3 or 4 more years from now, I don't think we can overhaul it much more after what they did with Starfield. I think they're kind of, like, reaching the limit of what they can do with it. And again, it's very expensive to develop for a new engine completely, and kind of go from the ground up when they have a lot of stuff. It's kind of hard to do that.
They have a lot of money, though.
Could they? Yes. Will they? No. But again, it comes back to the same thing then when we talk about this here, and it's a weird spot to be for this, because I'm like, there is some popularity here, but I'm worried that they're kind of on that back end of popularity, a lot of things, the way they've done stuff with the product line. So yeah, it just feels kind of strange that we've gotten at least 2 major products now from them.
To be fair, I do feel like this is probably a better way for them to make money than their games at this point. Because, to be fair, the Assassin's Creed universe is very interesting. And I do like how they basically put, like, the 4 characters that people actually liked. Which is, yeah.
I can't remember. I know Ezio's the name of the one there. It's the first game person.
Altair, Ezio. I don't remember who the person is from Game 3 because I never played that one.
Yeah.
And then I don't know the Viking woman because I haven't played that one either.
I do remember, like, out of the more recent ones, the Viking one was the more popular, but it just doesn't reach up to those older ones. So sort of like, it's not necessarily that they can't have very good games there in amongst their thing, but it's sort of like when we have like 5 games and one of them is good, or one of them is at least good enough to be not on par with those original ones, but getting closer to it. That's kind of bad numbers. So I don't know.
I mean, the problem is when it comes to video games, you can't go with the policy of we'll just throw shit out there until something sticks.
Yeah.
Because generally that attitude leads to nothing sticking. Occasionally something will, but it's all like, yeah, you're not gonna get a golden gem without putting a lot of effort in.
I think it's also that entire thing of, I think some people say it's like, yes, it's unfortunate that we're at a point in time with the major, at least the AAA part of the industry, the like mainstream part of the industry, where they don't take risks because they can kind of middle ground or like, overcharge a lot of ways for their product lines, when instead of like putting out some really great thing and then you fund a lot of like these smaller stuff, which you can try to find something else that'll stick there. You do your one big like, we're doing a pretty decent like, we're doing our Assassin's Creed Viking game, and it's going to be it's very popular and really people are going to like it and buy a bunch of it. But we're going to use some of that money for there to fund a bunch of like smaller kind of crud games that we can kind of throw against the wall and see if one of them would stick. And if one does, then we can make something better out of it. We've got a new, IP out of it. That was the old model, and we don't have that model anymore. And that model worked pretty well for a lot of years until, I don't know, the video game industry's a mess. That's an entirely different topic for another day. For maybe some other people. Just to summarize it, it's a mess.
Yeah. I could talk about Ubisoft for a while if we want to, but I don't think we want to.
No. Ubisoft is... But again, I was never a big Assassin's Creed person. I played a little of the backbone that became the Assassin's Creed, the Prince of Persia remakes with like Sands in Time, which that gameplay eventually became the gameplay of Assassin's Creed. I played a little bit of the original trilogy.
I mean, a lot of games had that kind of thing. It's very much the kind of Lara Croft gameplay as well.
Well, I'm just saying because like Ubisoft did that Sands of Time / the other 2 trilogy games, and then they used that kind of engine they developed to make the Assassin's Creed, which was a great idea because they kind of did something on their own then, and they threw something against the wall. But it is an interesting world, and that's another thing too. Is I agree. As someone that's not a huge fan of it, I do think there are a lot of interesting ideas with the world they have. They just don't do a lot with it. So maybe some more board games and RPGs and stuff will do a better job. I don't know.
I mean, at least it'll let people play the games they want to, rather than having to, like, play their bullshit.
Yeah. Let us talk about our next topic, though.
I do want to say, though, as an Assassin's Creed TTRPG is very much that they're making is an interesting idea because it kind of has to be a universal system because it's across like all time.
Yes, it is interesting that way, definitely.
Anyway, I just wanted to point that out because I just thought of that. Anyway, let's continue.
So, Days of Wonder, the people that do Ticket to Ride, which is a big favorite of mine and probably a pretty popular game, are doing a Star Wars game. They're doing a Battle for Hoth miniatures game for 2 to 4 players. That's supposed to be pretty quick. This is a very interesting thing for them to be doing. I'm kind of interested to see how this comes out of the entire thing. So this is one of the articles I found for here. Because unfortunately, I've been to Days of Wonder site. They don't have it up there. Oh no, I see where they also link here that they have the announcement up on their Facebook. So I'll link that one there. Because that's where they have their announcement for it. Oh, it's got a lot of junk. It's not a lot of things. It's just very long. I was worried about the back end of stuff, but there's only a few numbers there. I've been trying to watch those and not have too many, like, hugely long links.
I mean, I think it's okay if you're posting them, like, here. You definitely want to cut them out down for the,
for links in, on
like, on Discord, yeah. Or not Discord, yeah, description. Description, that's what I wanted to say. YouTube description.
So, this is interesting because they're going to be doing 17 different scenarios set in this battle, which is very... It's one of those things that's sort of like, I'm like, watching the movie, I wouldn't have known there would be 17 scenarios. I'm guessing it's sort of like different aspects of what was going on in the battle and expanding them into scenarios or things related to that, probably. Or maybe there's expanded lore that has come about over the years about what happened at the Battle of Hoth.
So, I mean, if you really consider it, yes, that is true, because the books went way more into detail with a lot of stuff. Like, the books broke down, like, I think every movie into several books. So, like, probably Hoth was, like, a whole book, you know?
Yeah. I'm sure, like, you know, there have been plenty of places for that. So, yeah, it's a strategic board game. They say it's 6 leaders, influence, deep dive into 2 dynamic multi-scenario campaigns. So it's sort of like you can probably do these scenarios on their own or campaigns of them, which is always neat. And it's supposed to be 30 minutes for each scenario, so that's neat. And again, it's like one of these things is like, I gotta be honest, I like these type of games. Like, harkening back to, once again, Wrath of Charlatan. You can do those adventures more than once, the same one. It's gonna be different every time, you know? Can you repeat them ad infinitum? Not a lot in a row. But if, like, you know, a couple months from now, we went back and revisited one of those scenarios we'd probably be fine with doing it again. Because, you know, different stuff would happen. It's not necessarily a bad thing to have the interesting scenarios. So, it's... Days of Wonder does some good games, but I am definitely interested to see their take on a miniatures game. Because again, I really do like their Ticket to Ride line, but I don't know much about other things that they've done beyond that. I've heard of some of their games, but I don't know. Where are you? Days of Wonder. There you go. I don't know about... Oh, they also had Small World. I don't know much about Heat. I know about... And some of their other games there. So, they've done a bunch of other games, but, you know... Again, Ticket to Ride's their big one there. Or Small World, you know those two. Those are the two that I know I can point out and be like, those games! Those are very interesting and very good games I could recommend.
Mm-hmm.
So, I guess we're going to just have to kind of see more of what's going to happen with this one. It's an interesting one. So.
I mean, to be fair, I just looked up the Battle of Hoth on Wikipedia, and, you know, the fact that they say, okay, this is basically just the description of the battle's titles. Plan K-10, Imperial Offensive, AT-AT Assault, Infiltration of Echo Base, and Rebel Escape. So just that is like 5 potential, like, scenarios, you know?
Yeah, and if there's details in there that could expand upon them to separate them out, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So.
No, there's apparently a lot going on there that the movie just really, like, it displayed a little bit of it, but not a lot of it, you know? So, it makes sense then. Yeah. Again, I can never complain about the original trilogy of Star Wars. You know, it's a classic. So something based upon it is always unique. Alright, one final thing here, and this is stuff that I'm not going to hit on very much, and we might just skim over this one, because I'm not going to lie, we don't have a Momo here to help us today. But, per Momo's instructions, I was taught well that over on the Goonhammer website, which I'll link to, we talk about it when we see a codex. Because those are important things in 40k. And so they are talking about two of the big upcoming 10th edition codexes here for Death Guard and World Eaters. So these are, I guess, basically like, if you are playing these factions, they have their unique rules. If you're interested in what a codex is. So it's basically like, it allows them to be more than just the, like, yes, there's the overall factions that they're in, you know, like Space Marines, Chaos Space Marines, those kind of things. But each individual then specialized group within them, in this case the World Eaters, who serve Khorne, and then I think the Death Guard, I don't know who they're with. Are they just normal Space Marines? No, they're also Chaos.
Yeah, they're Chaos. They're
this is me trying to remember. So yeah, Nurgle.
Nurgle, thank you.
Yeah, Nurgle, the Plague. So it's Khorne and Nurgle, related people. So it's two Chaos Space Marines. So again, like, it's one of those things is, you can generically be Chaos Space Marines, but this way, you can play these two factions, you know, with their own unique rules, which is always cool. Thumbs up on that one. And it's upgraded to the 10th edition rules. So I could probably tell you very little about what these 10th edition rules mean. I've linked the two articles to them, so if you are a Warhammer fan and want to check it out yourself, you certainly can.
Maybe I'll spend this week and actually watch people play the game and how it works.
Sort of like, it's one of those things is, like, I've learned a bunch of the lore and know some basics of the lore.
Same.
But actually the game, I've seen a little bit of gameplay, but it's sort of like, seeing gameplay is not breaking down how it's played, you know. I know that's, like, things have different attacks. You roll d6s depending on what faction, and in this case, you know, like, what sub-faction maybe you're playing, tells you how those d6s play out. Because I know things like...
I also know movement, like, you bring up these, like, rulers and, like, place them down to, like, figure out how far each unit moves, and you move them around, and there's, like, a whole thing. I also know there's a whole thing about, like, placing down, you know, units at the beginning and stuff, so...
So, like, the overview for Death Guard is everything's tougher there. Shooting units have gotten better, way less reliance on Plague Marines and PBCs. I don't know what those are. It's a more elite army, only being second to Custodies for value for each data sheet, and Daemons are also there. For overview for World Eaters, I guess base speed has been messed with. Again, increased shooting. Change some data sheets. They detachments and more daemons also for that. So I guess like they're getting like daemons are more connected to each of the groups there. So it's like kind of telling you where you could use them for, I guess, more mixed armies. So like you could, rather just doing like a demon army, you could also do like Chaos Space Marines with a demon contingent or something like that. So neat on that one. Again, like, it's cool. I don't know enough about mechanics to really give a full breakdown here, but I definitely recommend, if you are interested in looking into that, there's your source. So check it out. We got the updates there. Okay, so why don't we hit our deeper discussion topic? Now this is an interesting one that I had on the list for a while, but I finally thought about talking about it today. Because I was thinking more about, I had talked about probably a couple weeks ago, a month ago. I was continuing my series that I do over on YouTube, where I talk about the history of CCGs and talking about a lot of CCGs that have disappeared and stuff like that. And I talked about a very interesting one done by a company that does a lot of historical-based games, like miniatures games, and they did a trading card game.
Oh, okay. I found out what PBC stand for.
Okay,
Stand for Plague Burst Crawlers.
that sounds gross, but also like a horrible monstrosity that probably would work with them.
Mm-hmm.
So it makes sense. Great. Anyway, so it was a Dixie, which was a card game made in the late 90s that was based around war battles. It was
apparently a tank.
Ah, it's their tank. It's their form of a tank. Interesting. But it got me thinking, because this is a topic I came up with long ago that we never have hit. Basically, I thought of talking about this when I was doing Legacies of Kain a little bit. Because you can set World of Darkness into some old historical periods because of things like Dark Ages and stuff like that. Or like Werewolf has their Western version. There's some like Victorian Age stuff there, Renaissance, that does exist in basically extra books. So that's where this is. Using moments in world history is this kind of thing. And this can go to, I'm playing out a moment in world history, certainly speaking, in my tabletop role-playing games and stuff like that. But it also could be you inspired by it. Because certainly speaking, you could use something like the idea behind something like, let's say, the Napoleonic Wars, and just come up with that as a setting. That's your own fantasy version of that, or your own version of that in your own game. Okay. So there is more than just that kind of, like, using exactly the historic settings. Again, you can, certainly speaking, and I'm not saying that's not against things, certainly speaking, like, in something like World of Darkness, you can. And again, like, talking about it here, how there are games that have used them. Like, miniatures war games are a lot of them. And a lot of them, can be very fanciful, but there are those that use historical settings for their battles and for their setup. And, again, coming back to, I think it was Columbia Games that did Dixie. They've done a lot of, like, historical battle decks. They did Civil War, they did, like, various wars that do exist in the products they put out there. And these are settings, then, too. And it doesn't have to be necessarily battles or wars for that, too. It's going to be time periods, ideas behind them. Think about a lot of fantasy settings. They tend to be based around, honestly, medieval Europe.
Mm-hmm.
But you can have other places in the world that have other settings. Like, and I think, like, inspiration for real-world history ends up being in, like, a lot of worlds. Like, you get a little bit of that in, like, Faerun and Forgotten Realms. But you also get that in Galarian. Because honestly speaking, like, a bunch of countries in TNZ feel very, like, inspired by historical versions of countries from Asia. That we know about. So,
Mongolia, Japan, China, Taiwan, etc.
And so, like, the cultures is fine too, but, like, also events that could have happened in those countries and using versions of them for your storylines is, I think, because we've talked about using kind of inspired by cultures before, but I think it also could come back to, you could use events like that, and that could be very interesting point and guide for, like, a storyline where you come up with your own version of something like that, As I said, like, major wars are big events that happen, plagues that historically happen, other events that have happened, can be very inspirational in ideas. You can look to history for ideas or stories, because as much as they don't have fanciful elements, you can always add those if it's a fanciful game, but there's a lot of interesting things that have happened, honestly, in history. I think that's...
Okay, so what is this topic? Is it alternate histories, alternate Earth?
Okay.
Inspiration
Coming
from history?
back to it. This inspiration from history.
Okay.
Yeah, it's inspiration from our history. We've talked about inspiration from our cultures, but this inspiration from our history and stuff too. Because there are plenty of games that use our history a lot like that too. So that's kind of where I'm coming down to, you can use inspiration from our world in a lot more than just, like, the really cool, like, culture or people that we have. There are events that, they don't necessarily, like, again, like, if I would be inspired by coming up with a storyline based around the, like, War of the Roses, that's a very English war. You don't have to use it, like, a own version of England. You can make it whatever. You can make a version of that has cultures that be more inspired by, like, African cultures or Asian cultures, or even, like, South American cultures that just has a similar based political war to what was going on during that time period, there. So it's like we can take real-world events, and the culture maybe doesn't matter to the events, but if there's interesting things happening in history, we can talk about.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's where I'm kind of trying to come with this topic here.
Yeah. So something I do find interesting is, come on, they used to have this. Sorry, I'm trying to find something.
Okay.
Okay, well, I'll find that in a little bit. But anyway, yeah, I would argue that, like, a lot of stuff is, like, okay, there we go. Okay, so, yeah. So I find it interesting because I just wanted to double check if this was a thing. So I don't know if you've heard of Extra Credits, which is a channel focused on video game design.
I watched their extra history, but I know the extra credits. I haven't checked a lot of their out. I like their history.
And that's where I'm getting at, is they're about game design, and yet the other channel they have is extra history. Because, and that's what I'm trying to get at, is history is very important, because you're basically going to take, and when I was actually watching them pretty regularly around the time they announced their extra history channel, and when their thing was like, it's understanding game design is very, like, or as far as story writing goes, it's very important to understand history.
Yeah.
And that's kind of why they wanted to start extra history.
That makes sense a lot, you know? I think that's the kind of thing which, like, originally inspired me to talk about this. And again, as I said, me talking about a card game that, like, it's one of those things is, there are time periods that are very charged. Like, you know, even hundreds of years later, there are things that are charged historically. You know, a lot of major wars and conflicts, you know, as much as it's been a while, it's been over 150 years. The American Civil War is a charged conflict in a lot of ways still, too. It was a big, major conflict. It's a civil war, you know, especially here in America. And so, like, we can talk about other events that, you know, have a retrospect in our thoughts, you know, because they were major events that happened in our own history. And the same can be for any country. But, like, game they did was incredibly fascinating. It boiled it down to very simple gameplay. It seemed fun and interesting. Now, granted, it didn't clash on a lot for a CCG, but, like, yeah, it didn't need to dive into a lot of that for the game. And I think that's also the thing, too, is when we look at historical events, you can use as much as you want for it. You're just getting kind of inspired by it. You don't need to, like, have all the things happen, because sometimes, yes, interesting things happen in history. Awful things happen in history, too. You know, granted, if it's appropriate to your story, great. You don't always have to have, like, everything happen. It's like you are looking for inspiration.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the thing. Like, history has everything that could never happen basically already has happened. You know, like, it's kind of the same idea of anything that has been written, or anything that could be written has already been written. Any idea that could be created has already been created. While I 100% disagree with all of these, I also 100% agree with these. It's less about the individual ideas and how they're mixed. And that's why learning and taking inspiration from history is important. I mean, a lot of people focus on things like the Roman Empire, but I mean, you could have a whole series dedicated around catching someone, or catching, like, a serial killer, and you could just take inspiration from a real serial killer and real crime stuff, you know?
You could do a version of, like, Jack the Ripper, but in, like, D&D or Pathfinder. You could do them, you know, or you could set it, like, you know, modern day and do, like, a Vampire the Masquerade. You could set it in future and have it in Shadowrun. You know, you could have maybe, like, two neighboring countries are on the brink of war, and you're trying to stop them. You know, wars happen in all ages, and even, like, in our modern age, it can happen. You know, certainly speaking, like, in fanciful or, you know, more interesting worlds that have, you know, different checks and stuff like that, that can be more likely, and especially fantasy worlds. And yeah, like, you can add magic on top of things, you know, always, for, you know, for a lot of those. But, like, you know, sci-fi worlds and all that kind of stuff, they a lot of that stuff, too. So
Yeah, I mean, just remember, like, I feel like people often forget about this, but non-detection and like cover-up spells do exist in D&D and stuff.
yeah,
Like usually, like it's not like this. Oh, well, we can just cast this spell and suddenly we know everything. Yeah, it's pretty uncommon in D&D. Um, you know, and you know what I find interesting actually is even sometimes if you like look into people's perceptions of history at the time, can actually make some very interesting ideas. Like sorry, I recently saw a video on serial killers, which is why my brain's on this.
I mean, that is definitely something that has happened in history. That is maybe not as usually major events, but there are like again. Think about Jack the Ripper. It's been quite a long time, but he has notoriety.
Yep.
And that's why it keeps in the zeitgeist of a lot of things there too. And so that's an example of a major series of crimes can mark down and be like, oh shit, that kind of stuff happened. And people remember that stuff.
Yeah. Anyway, what I was going to get at though, I didn't want to finish. You interrupted me a little bit, but you're good. Is there was a serial killer who in Russia during the Cold War, and basically he actually succeeded for a long time because the people didn't believe that a serial killer could exist in Russia because they thought that was a Western thing. Anyway, so what the cops did, and this is where I'm getting to, is they looked into cults and demonic worship and that kind of stuff. And my thought was, well, that's what people perceived. So what if that were true? That'd be a fun, interesting, like how could you turn that into a thing, So it's all like, sometimes even just looking into like the mistakes people made can give you ideas.
And again, like, it's when you look into history and you want to get inspiration from it, certainly you can get inspiration from big events, but those small events happen too. Major serial killers, crime sprees, small acts of rebellion that maybe didn't go anywhere. Two major trading companies having like some kind of like feud or something like that. You can look into these things.
People escaping from prison. Heck, you can even just look into like how rich people behave. Like, I don't know. There's always this thing I've kind of considered where it's just like rich people are just eccentric. Like, you can't become rich without becoming eccentric. Like, once you get a lot of money, you just get kind of weird.
Yeah. Like, and there have been enough eccentrics out there, you can kind of pick on some of them and, like, see things that people have done. And those can be just interesting. They can tell stories. And, again, certainly speaking, there are real-world settings, TTRPGs and stuff like that, that have more real-world things. But even the fantastical, even sci-fi ones, you can pick up on this. You have to think about, like, if I'm playing a Star Wars or Star Trek game, or even Starfinder, you can do a lot of these weird stories in those, too. You could do a serial killer in space. I think they did that in an episode of Star Trek, or one of them. They had, like, someone that was, like, dealing with that kind of stuff.
Yeah. In fact, actually, sorry, I was thinking about eccentric, like, rich people. Fun fact, I think it's Jeff Bezos, who is actually building like a giant clock in a mountain that like ticks every 1 year. And it's all like, I mean, what if you just have some kind of eccentric person who wants you to go fetch this rare magical part to stabilize their weird machine, that they just are building for no reason because they're rich.
I'm just hearing that. I'm just gonna give a sigh there on that one. I'm like, yeah, okay, that's a thing that's happening.
Yeah, I mean, that's how rich people work. That's what I mean. That's what I mean when I say, like, you can't become rich without becoming a little bit eccentric.
Yeah.
When you have more money than you know what to do with, you find weird ways to spend it.
Jeff, come on, Jeff, man. Hey, we could use a little help over here on the Twitch side. Maybe we could use our own giant clock here. Just saying. Anyway. Oh. Yeah.
So, like, again, history, just looking into, like, random facts about people, just looking into, like, how the world works and how people work. is just such a great way to get inspiration for things,
Yeah.
big and small. Yeah, big battles, big influential people to the small people. I mean, we have like odd facts about like random fishermen, you know, like who just live their lives day to day.
It's one of those things is like, as I said, in a different video, in a different one of these topics, we talk more about the cultural side and adapting cultures. And that's always good. But events and things that happened, yeah, you could put them into whatever culture is appropriate to them. But a lot of these times, these things are culturally agnostic. You can do really interesting things and use these things for inspiring you in all kinds of different, really interesting ways. It's the, the world is interesting. A lot of people have done a lot of crazy and interesting things. Talk about it all you want, or use it however you want in ways.
Yeah. Like how Alexander the Great literally like enslaved a population to take a bunch of stones and then use them to build a what is it called? A causeway to a castle on an island so you could siege it.
Alexander did a lot of things.
Yeah.
And,
who thinks of that though? You're just like, here's this. It's like we want to get to that castle. Well, here's this town of people. Let's just force them to throw stones into the water until it builds up enough so we can walk across it.
It's just certainly there are some really insane characters out there historically that like you could use, inspire you. It's just that thing is there are so many things out there to inspire you. You can use. The word cultures, the word history, popular media. We've talked about all these things, and it's just like it's more tools for you to think about, and it's just important to have the most filled toolbox when you're building your RPGs and running them. Have a good toolbox. Have these things at pen, so you know when to open up your toolbox and pull something out to use.
You want to know something I would actually recommend? This is kind of an odd one, but it's something I've been doing recently. Listen to books translated into whatever language you have is fine, obviously. But listen to books that were written in other countries. Like, I've been listening to books written in Russia, and it's just the themes are so interesting. There's always crime. Like, crime is just a way of life in these books. Aristocracy is very important. Like, aristocracy and hierarchy and, like, is just super important. I'm
getting flashbacks to Crime and Punishment. I think I would have enjoyed that book more if I did not have to read it for school.
Yeah.
Flashbacks.
Yeah.
Crime and Punishment. Aristocracy.
Yeah,
crime. Oh god.
Yeah. In fact, part of me wishes that certain places certain countries were more developed, so that way we could get people who made a living off of writing, so we could read their books. Like, imagine a Congo Africans book. I'm like, I'd love to figure out that culture.
Yeah, all the interesting bits of the cultural take on some of these stories from people from the Congo.
Well, I'm just talking about like someone from that culture writing fiction.
That's what I mean. Yeah, someone writing a story that is in the lens of their own culture, because you kind of write generally speaking, you write in the lens of your own culture. Depending, some people go outside that, but you always have a little bit of like where you come from in there.
Mm-hmm. Like it was just like that's the thing. Like I've listened to two different authors now, and I've just noticed these themes between both of them, of like crime is just a given in life. You just have to deal with it, which is honestly totally sounds Russian, like a Russian idea to me. That now that I think about it, and like and then there's a social hierarchy is very important, which I didn't actually realize about Russia, but it totally makes sense given both pre Cold War, or both pre-Soviet Russia and in Soviet Russia, and it makes sense that it kind of stuck around post-Soviet Russia, because
it's because that's the thing is like it does reflect the culture historically too, and I think it's also like it also comes down also probably to, honestly speaking, regions in a lot of these places too, because I would be interested to someone that's from like Eastern Russia, instead of more like, probably we're getting a lot more information on books from more Western Russia, because most of the population is over there. Eastern Russia is pretty empty. Not that there are people there, but in comparison, it's sort of like when you talk about like Canada, most of the people are close to the border. There aren't that many people up in northern Canada. So that's going to be a different kind of expression of that same culture there too, which can kind of be interesting for the direction there too. It's sort of like there is so much expression in that comes it, and also these areas have their own like history, worldview, and all these different things, and you can help just develop this entire thing of inspiration. Like it's if I wanted to do a very Japanese inspired adventure, there's a difference between like if I go something more like southern Japan, Kyushu, or even Hokkaido, like northern Japan. Those are very different views and like ways of doing things, even within one country. Look at the United States. People in the Northeast are different in a lot of ways than people in the Midwest, and people in the South, and people in over in the West, California, or even up close the Northwest, over with Seattle and Oregon. There are little differences in the way that the general culture is, and a lot of kind of interesting historical events that have happened in all these regions. So you have culture, history, people, and expression all being very different and interesting. And, I think it's sort of like maybe kind of getting an idea of a larger inspiration and then working down and like figuring out like little bits in there, like taking like little pits and looking at them and figuring out, building a picture of what you want to do is always good.
Yeah. And you got mixing and matching. I mean, like if you really think about it, generic fantasy is literally just a mixture of ancient myths, do we have Onis and Medusas and Mononongals and that kind of stuff.
It's like when you look at something like Dungeons & Dragons, where it came from, it is very medieval Europe coded, but then it's sort of like, well, we went to medieval Europe and then we just threw in mythology from like pretty much everywhere, just a little bit here and there.
I mean, generic D&D is bad about that. I like Golarion a little bit more because they actually separate it into their appropriate regions. They just allow for blending, like, this creature migrated from over here or was bred over here by some entrepreneurs trying to get some kind of resource, or, they actually they generally have a reason for why this weird thing from this other place is over here.
And again, like, probably 50 to 75% of the time, it's like, magic did it, but again, like, in a magical world, magic did it. It's a good excuse, but they at least say that to you. It's like, some magic shit happened, and something ended up over here,
Yeah.
So it does, but yeah, you're right, it does a very good story about why these things are like that, and telling these stories is, good reason behind it. And I think Golarion's a good example of using, like, things that could link to history, culture, and like regions and stuff like that, and giving you an idea of where to work off of. Yes, you can use Golarion, but you also, I think I like it a lot. It is one of my more favorite worlds recently, because it gives a really good example of using a lot of stuff. When I read about this country that, I'm not going to lie, sounds very Korea coded, I'm like, yeah, okay, that's an interesting thing that deals with mythology, it's its own country, but you can kind of read, or over here that's very Japan coded, or over here that's very like this region of China coded, this area that's very Mongolian coded, etc., etc.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of funny because, like, in my little world, my little world that I built, I'm thinking of renaming it. That's why I hesitated to say the name. Yeah, it's like my brain went, well, what if I put Japanese culture in this desert?
Yes. And that's actually kind of an interesting idea, too, where you can kind of, like, say, like, a culture akin to this developed here, but what would being in this region do to the basic ideas of some of this culture? How would it evolve? And I think that can kind of come up with, like, yes, you start off in a basis, but you create your own culture completely and utterly in a lot of ways. And it's sort of like, yes, you can make up something all on your own, but generally speaking, we all take inspiration because it's what we know. You know, you're not going to get away from, I know this, I know these events, I know these kind of things, I've learned about these things, that's what I'm going to use. You know, if you are going to do a, a lot of these stories, and like, even when I'm coming down to like, I'm building a story based around some kind of villain character, well, where am I getting inspiration from? Is it from historical villains? Is it from, media villains? Somewhere along the line, I have picked up on something and understand why this character is doing something bad, and I'm using that inspiration I had gotten from these things to build the character. This guy from history that's pretty terrible. Why is it there? All these kind of things. And, yeah. History, world, they're all part of your toolbox, just have them in it.
Yeah, like, what if this group of people were instead cat people and had, claws and stuff, and, what if that... I mean, you can mix cultures a bit, there's, like, lots of ideas.
Yeah, mixed cultures, mixed histories, too, you could have a major conflict set off by, like, something... You can have, like, things kind of linked together, too. Like, this kind of thing that happened in our history leads to something else entirely that might be based on something else in our history, or something that, and it's done by these people inspired by these people, and kind of like, so, and then you have a figure that's kind of Alexander the Great in front of it, but he's not, but he's part of this culture then instead, so how would that make him different? He's kind of this more conquering figure, and you're kind of combining all these ideas, and it's going to be something completely different, and you're going to have to fill in the blanks in here, but you're kind of like combining a lot of ideas together and percolating together,
Yeah.
And being inspired by it. Inspiration's fine. It's good.
Yeah, Archwizard Ferdinand was shot by an archer, causing the three elven nations who had secret alliances going to war.
Mm-hmm. They had a secret alliance, but now this assassination has driven them apart, and so they are dire villains. And it's all the fault of this. Oh, go ahead.
I was about to say, did you pick up on what that was?
Oh, that was World War One. We went World War One.
Yeah, and so I'm just like, but the idea there is like you could totally do that, like.
Yeah. And you could have then your war campaign, or maybe you can set a campaign where the Archduke has been assassinated and tensions are rising and war is about to break out, and maybe your player characters are doing something that maybe they find something that can help them maybe stop the war. Maybe they're part of a diplomatic convoy that's trying to negotiate. Maybe they've learned.
I call them
this,
Archwizard Ferdinand.
Yeah, Archwizard. Yes, sir. And maybe find out who's behind the assassination. And if they go capture them, they could prevent this conflict. There's a lot of stories you could do there that you could go into a war, or you could just use this event as, like, a spark of, like, maybe you could do something to stop it and stuff like that.
Yep. Yeah. So, like, I mean, just knowing history, you can just steal things and just mix some things around, and man, you can get, like, honestly, I kind of want to run that, I kind of want to, like, work off that. Like, that's an interesting campaign seed,
Yeah.
Like, stuff can happen from that, and it's literally just the start of World War One.
Yeah, a major figure, political figure, is assassinated, and that's creating ripples that are causing major powers to theoretically go to war, which could, it's probably not going to be the same kind of like World War, but that could, in a region, draw other smaller countries into it. It could be a massive war, kind of like major campaigns across Europe have been had before World War One. That drew a lot of countries in. It could be another conflict like that. It's just World War One drew, like, pretty much all the major powers across the world in, which was kind of a little different. That's why it's World War. But still, major European conflicts did occur. Anyway, there's that history lesson part of this. Okay.
And then how would a war like that work with magic? That's another question. You can take a historical event and say, how would this have happened if we had X?
It's that kind of thing that, like, I think is not always addressed as well in these fantasy things is how would war... Certainly speaking, there are points in time where places talk about it. Like, I do like that historically, things like some of the results of wars and very powerful magics exist in, like, Olirant. Like, there's this field of people that were turned to stone with, like, a powerful, like, probably, like, level 20, like, wizard spell, you know, when, you know, who was, like, the king of, I think it was, like, Geb or Nyx, one of those two. You know, they got invaded and turned a whole lot of people to stone, and there's literally this stone of field of statues that still exists today. That's a pretty big example of, like, big magic spells. But what does that mean when you have strategic class spells like that? You know?
Funny enough, I think we should actually look at modern warfare techniques to, like, battle that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you have a spell like Stinking Cloud and it just settles over an area, because I think Stinking Cloud spreads out in some versions of D&D. I don't, like, over time. Like,
and at least it also kind of does, like, you know, floats around to a little bit.
Yeah, and so it's all like, well, how would that work? Well, how did that work in World War I when we started using chemical weapons, you know? You know, and then you go like, okay, well, you have Fireball. Okay, well, what happens if you, like, have an RPG shot at you? Like, how do people react to that in modern day, you know? Yeah. It's funny because, in a way, by having, like, actual things, like, I mean, even, like, a Petrify spell, if you think about it, could be, like, a type of, like, weapon. And if you, like, think about, you know, like, okay, it's a weapon that kills you, let's see, like, you know...
And the thing is, like, it's a fantasy world. You could have people, like, riding wyverns, drakes, dragons, you know, griffins, stuff like that. So you can have flying units. Think about, I think it was either griffins or hippogriffs that were in Corvosa. That was a major part of their military.
Yeah, they were they were griffins. Yeah, they were griffins.
But griffin riders means they had air superiority in that area too, which is like, it is a different thing than our traditional medieval things, and that is more akin to, like, something you could think of for modern warfare, where there are, you know, you've got planes and flying.
Oh, no, they were hippogriffs.
Sorry, I knew there were one of the two. I didn't remember the griffins.
I just looked it up. I thought they were griffins, but I decided to look it up anyway, and I was wrong. They were hippogriffs.
I could not remember, so thank you for looking at it. Now we remember. Well, now I know. But, you know, these are different things that do add a lot to the nature of these things, that, you know, you look at the lens of these events in the setting that it's in. Even, like, sci-fi settings or sci-fantasy settings have a lot of things. You know, a event similar to this occurring in something like a sci-fi setting means a lot different, but it could have similar effects, you know. And so, you know, you can talk fantasy, but you can use this for a lot of different settings, certainly speaking, and they work just the same. You know, you just have to kind of, like, look at how the lens of how this world would affect these things that are happening. You know, how would this assassination not only affect this area here, how would it affect the area you're building, how would it affect it with the setting we have, with what's going on, with their magic, with their science, with all these kind of things. What does it mean then? Mm-hmm. Space travel, you know, all this.
And totally magic. I said magic, like, look at it in the lens of, like, current modern day stuff. There is some obviously, like, limitations to that. Like, how do you handle a scrying orb? It's a magical orb that can appear in a place and you can't see it. But then you have to go, okay, well then how would they deal with that? They'd have mages who can detect scrying or detect, you know, invisibility or see invisibility or whatever it is that you use to, like, overcome it.
Like, you know? Areas so where they probably discussing, like, battle plans, they probably have, like, special non-detection stuff to prevent scrying.
Yeah, or they discuss in anti-magic fields to make sure there's no, like, magical bombs that are, you know.
There's like, there are things that can be done, but it's also, like, new. It's like, it adds threats, but there's also, like, answers that would make sense logically. Especially, like, it also, again, depends on how magical your world is, depends on how sciencey your world is. Like, Golarion, which is a very high magic world, you have to think about these things happening. There are other worlds that are more low magic, or, I was thinking something like the Middle Earth, the Lord of the Rings. That's probably, it's got magic, but it's more low magic things, but you can see how things work a lot more in those worlds in the movies, and that gives you an idea about how a lot of these things work. I think that's where, like, when we have established settings, that helps too. But again, even those established settings, you could have a story based on something that's going on. Maybe you're over in Bree, and there's a serial killer going on who's totally Jack the Ripper, and you're group of hobbit, a dwarf, and a elf who happen to be there are solving the crime. You know, and you know, something like that could definitely just happen. Is that a little like outside the purview of what you'd think for a Lord of the Rings game? Sure, but it's probably still be fun.
I mean, like, that's the thing. Like, you just totally could do that, and you know, it's. I mean, like, why not? I was gonna say, it's like, you know, I mean, maybe there's like all. I mean, you know, like D&D. Maybe instead their magical serial killing is, you know, they just use a very specific, like, that you know, because the specific type of victim is always killed by a specific type of spell, you know.
It turns out that rather than just a serial killer, some kind of cultist of Sauron who's trying to, like, you know, appease his master and, you know, fight him, and, you know, that's the main storyline. So I've already solved the problem of, like, adding it into Lord of the Rings lore, you know.
I mean, yeah, there's a thing where it's all like, if you don't want to include, like, a serial killer, because I mean, you know, there's actually a weird debate on, like, when serial killers started, because Jack the Ripper is the first one known, but was he actually the first one? Or was it just the first time where like, it was just sensational? It was one that was just sensationalized in a way that made it a public-facing issue that made it so people, like, actually knew about it. Because before that, you know, you could think like cops just did their job, whereas this, like, became a public thing. Yeah. So maybe, like, cops knew about serial killers before, but it just wasn't publicized because, you know, maybe to prevent panic or something. But this one was picked up by the media and stuff.
Yeah.
So
yeah, because again, like, it's been interesting to, you know, you hear about a lot of, like, major killers or bad people that did a lot of terrible things, criminals, people that could even be maybe considered, like, you know, weren't called serial killers back then, but probably would have been considered more now for a lot of the bad things they did. But again, like, you can look at and hear about these people because, again, like, usually people that did stuff were talked about, but, like, they might not have gotten that kind of recognition. So it's like, you could always look at the history of these things. Like, you know, hey, the Wild West in America, there's a lot of, like, crazy shit that happened around here, you know, in our country back then. It was wild. It was filled with a lot of criminals, and there were some pretty terrible people.
Yeah. I mean, there's also just the fact that, like, someone who went around murdering people probably also just got murdered themselves at some point when, like, they crossed the wrong person. Like, that's the thing, like, as, you know, I mean, if everyone's carrying a sword, you know, as was common, like, you go and attack someone, they might just be able to fight you off, you know. So it's like, maybe that's a reason serial killers, like, it took a more peaceful society for a serial killer to come about, because before that they were just a murderer who eventually got killed.
Yeah. The people that, you know, became bandits or killers and, you know, went and did their thing and eventually ended up dead, you know? It's hard to say, like, historically how many, you know, like, you know, we you know, you can talk about, like, you know, something like Robin Hood, you know, as a bandit. But how many of those kind of bandits like that, which would have been, like, yeah, pretty awful people, and, you know, just killed countless people, you know, that kind of stuff. You don't know.
Yeah.
And I think it's a good spot to leave that there. I think this was a very interesting kind of conversation that kind of it culminated, kind of came together with a bunch of those topics we had talked about. Bringing them all together. I think it was interesting. Anyway, shall we talk about our weekend gaming then? Woo-hoo.
Yeah.
Well, did you have anything before Wednesday? I did not.
No, I did not either.
Okay, so Wednesday was our big one, all that as well. I think things went much better than last week. I think it was...
Agreed.
I think, I could have still used, some of those battles, because I actually prepared a bunch of, like, small battles that were, like, a couple of trivial, a couple, like, one, like, medium, and a couple more, like, in between there. I did actually try to, like, set that up and, like, design some more battles, and, like, even the more difficult battle, I did, like, also kind of, like, judge it a little better, too, so it wasn't just, too bad.
Yeah.
2 large badgers.
Yeah, I mean, because it was just because the 2 badgers were just annoying. Like, looking back, they weren't bad, they were just annoying. They just weren't a fun enemy to fight. Because, like, I think they would have been fun as, like, an enemy with other enemies, but as an enemy alone, I feel like they were just really annoying, because it's just 2 badgers who are just hard to kill.
Yep.
And the only way to kill them is to hit them multiple times, so they can't use more than their one reaction, you know?
Yeah, if not, it's either, like, you have to get them to, like, wounded 3.
Yeah, wounded 3, or hit them twice before their turn. You know, it's like, okay, cool.
Yeah. No,
it's harder than it sounds too.
And I think I'll play around with the formula. Maybe next time I'm like sitting down and like I'll probably talk to some people like you and some others to see about but I think the alternate exploration, I think refining it more than like I did, I think was good. It still needs some work, but I think it was a lot better than my first iteration.
Yeah, to actually say what I said to you, just in case people are curious, my suggestion was to make everyone pick their activity at the beginning of the round and just make it last for that round, or if, you could be after you roll for the activities. I could also see an alternate.
Maybe choose activities first and then roll to see what your challenges are facing.
And then pick the activities. So that way you don't necessarily know, like, you're like, okay, I'm gonna, guarantee one, and then you go, okay, well, yeah. Oh, then the other option was also, the other thing I said was to describe the activity first, or describe what it was we went into, and that way we can figure out, pick what we're going to do to get around it as our, action.
I think because that was a little better too, like, the challenges and stuff like that, describing them.
Yeah, just so that way it's less, because, like, that's the thing. Otherwise, it's just pick your best ability, and that's how we get around it.
I think sometimes it will be that, but, like...
Oh, yeah, like, I mean, that's the thing. People are going to go up against the thing they're best at anyway. Mm-hmm. Like, if it's a barrier and your best stat is strength, we're going to pick that person. If it's a magical construct and your best stat is arcana, we're going to pick you for that. So that's obvious, but, like, that's the whole point is, okay, well, we run into it, and then you find out it's an occult magical symbol. And you go, oh, I don't have a cult,
Mm-hmm.
Well, now I need to think of another way around it. So I'm going to create an arcana construct to counter this occult construct. How about that? Like, you have to think about it, and you have to come up with a reason, which I think is more interesting.
So, basically, you finished exploring the dungeon area, which went pretty well, because you managed to roll really well. Again, the thing is...
We made up for all the terrible rolls we did for the past
It was so fascinating because I did lower the DC, but it wasn't by a lot. Like, most of the things were standard DC 18 instead of 20. That's not a big difference, but you were having so much more success. I think you rolled 1 failure the entire time.
2, but yeah.
Well, 2 failures. One of them you canceled out the bad stuff on.
Yes.
Yeah. So it was pretty successful, and definitely kept with those combos. Like. Even with lowering the again, it was just really good rolls. You got through that. Got to this interesting facility, which is run by someone who you're not sure whose side they're on, but they were definitely doing horrible illegal experiments. At least morally illegal to your company.
I was under the impression that they were just the Dread Army. Like, they were part of the Dread Army.
That's the thing is...
experiments to infiltrate.
It very well could be, but the way I presented it, at least right now, I did not say for sure. You did not have evidence either way. Very well, it could be the Dread Army. And maybe you'll find that out. But, I never said yes or no on that one.
Mm.
So, that'll be interesting to see. But, yeah, you found some stuff, and people were running... someone was running very horrible experiments. And it seems like at least this part of the facility has been abandoned. But it means that there's another one nearby. Just have to maybe those notes can discover it, or maybe you can find some hints somewhere else.
And Ixpanor now knows how to create chimera juice.
Is it helpful? Probably not. It's like I wouldn't call it chimera juice. I would call it like preservative, but it works on living things. It's like. It's tube juice that you can keep something alive in a tube. You know, if you want to put it like in
actually that can be very useful. If we come across like something that we want to preserve or something.
Yeah, somebody or something that you want to like capture. And,
I mean,
like,
it can't be necessarily someone, because the whole thing is that it's like, but yeah, like something, like a small thing. Because like my thought is like, if I use quick alchemy to make this mixture and then like put something in it, I'm thinking like, you know, like a fish or something, like,
yeah,
oh, here's this rare fish that we need to bring back, put it in here and preserve it.
There are definitely uses for it. I don't know if you will find those uses for your self during the game, but it doesn't mean you couldn't. It's one of those things is like, I currently, with how the storyline goes, don't see a exact way of doing it, but you could be clever and come up with something, you know.
Yep.
I'm not adding it necessarily to the story, but if you give me a suggestion, I'll work off of that. I've been trying to do that too, you know, very well. But,
I mean, the rule I've heard as a GM is always have one solution you can think of, but allow players to come up with their own.
I've been trying to be very good about that, especially, like, I gotta be honest, it's when having played through, like, the first edition Venture Pass, where they don't present a lot of those alternate solutions, it's just hurt a lot. You know?
Yeah.
It has been very nice to be like, you know, what are you doing? You know, what's your solution to this? And I think it has had some interesting moments. You know, things like Tiv smashing up all those jars. That was a very interesting moment too. Or like, you know,
yeah.
Honestly speaking, it made sense for his character. Knowing his character, not liking those poor things combined in there. You know.
Mm-hmm.
But all of your own reasons. It did make a mess of the place.
Yes.
So that was interesting. I guess that was most of my week. I don't think I did anything else tabletop related. Did you do anything else before Saturday?
No.
You got
so.
You can talk about today.
Yeah. So today is, I mean, today was a little short because reasons. I mean, basically, my internet died. Something went wrong, I guess, and we had an outage in the area. And since someone else was also sick, the GM decided to cut the game short. However, we still basically... So we actually got out of the Murderoid. I'm surprised no one died, because, I mean, the Murderoid is for fighting ships, and it was attacking people. Because 2 people landed on its surface. So, anyway, but they got out, and then we got away. It did a lot of damage to our ship, though. And then we made it to port, the port we were going to. And we looked into finding out information about the next place we're going, which is Dark Star, which is basically a place with a bunch of undead. And yeah, so we'll look into it. So, and then we divvied up loot that we were sitting and waiting for. Because that was something we could do while I was not able to access Roll20. Because that was the big issue, is I wasn't able to get on to Roll20.
Because I guess you can kind of like get on a phone at very least.
Yeah, I got on my phone and was able to talk, and so it was like I was able to do that but then at basically the halfway point where you normally take a break, you just ended it.
Yeah, like, it's the unfortunate thing.
And then my internet came back on 15 minutes later.
I think that is a big thing that I do kind of like get a little annoyed with, and maybe they'll eventually do this. That you can't really do real time on your phone. That would be very nice if you could like access your sheets or something.
You actually can through Google on your phone. You can actually move stuff around. They've actually built it in a way now to where you actually can manipulate it properly on your phone. The big problem is their app. They don't have an app for it, which I think would be better if they had a separate app that was designed better for it. The issue is, though, I was able to like type in roles into the command, but it's like, what am I gonna do there? You know, like. Yeah. It was like so small, and like it was so hard because it's like my phone's so small, and I couldn't do a hotspot because apparently like I was gonna do a mobile hotspot to my my tablet, but I found out I couldn't because my account isn't set up to have a hotspot. So my phone plan doesn't. Well, it can, I think, but you have to set it up. But I don't have access to that because I'm still on my parents' phone plan.
Yep. You know, I get that. I have been eternally on a family phone plan.
I mean, that's the thing. Like, the reason, like, as much as I would like to be fully independent, there's a point where, one, it's cheaper for them to have a phone plan like that. You know, like, there's kind of a point where it's like 3 or 4, it's the same, you know?
That is actually the exact same reason that I'm on a family phone plan with my parents. It was that I wanted to get one, and they could get on mine then for very cheap. And it worked out very well.
So anyway, but I don't have access to like the account, so I can't like set that up. But yeah, so yeah, it wasn't a lot. So there's some stuff I need to reply to because there's a bunch of discussion about what we're gonna do next in the chat, and I haven't really looked at and responded to that yet. Yeah,
I guess it kind of would have been a difficult time to do that.
Yeah. And I also need to now add a bunch of stuff to my sheet and stuff, because, like, I have to add my experience, because I couldn't add that, because, like, yeah.
Alright, well, that sounds like a really good week in gaming. Fine, good week in this. I guess we can give our outros. I guess if you want to, well, thank you again for joining me, of course, Warren. Always good to have you here. If you want to give your shout out, please do. As we can. Did I
slash shout out, not exclamation.
Oh, I keep forgetting which one's which because you use
slash is in built commands. Exclamation point is Nightbot commands. Nightbot or any bot command usually uses exclamation.
So it's like I keep doing that. I keep getting the two of them confused. My brain just is bad.
That's fair. I mean, to be fair, like unless you program a lot, you don't get used to those nuances. I mean, anyway, I'm DiamondWyrm. You can find me on twitch.tv/DiamondWyrm or at DiamondWyrm on Twitter, and Blue Sky, and DiamondWyrm9234 on YouTube. Hopefully that will change at some point. I feel like I should start mentioning that because I do have a YouTube. I have a lot of videos there now. I've been uploading all my stuff. I'm a little behind because when I had my vacation days, I completely forgot to upload because I just broke my routine.
Yep.
Anyway, but yeah, follow me on Twitch and subscribe on YouTube. Yeah. Yep. My next stream will be probably tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. PDT.
Cool. Myself. As I have a Dracovin. You can, of course, always join me here. We'll be back next week for the show again. But if you want to see me before then, other than Fall of Avenswell, Wednesdays at 8, I am usually on most days of the week, starting with Tuesday through Friday. I do either tabletop, where I record some stuff live, chat in between, do some little gaming there, or I do some gaming too. Friday in the evenings, me, Worm, and Blaze do some gaming there too. There's a lot of little things that we do. So you can always check out my schedule, but I will be back on Tuesday. Barring any family-related circumstances, because, again, those come up. But the plan is be back on Tuesday. So I will see people then. Anyway, everybody, have a great rest of your weekend, a great rest of your Saturday. And once again, thank you, Worm. And until the next time, I bid everyone out there a farewell goodbye. Oh God, I'm coughing.